Welcome to the First Nations Health Managers Association's weekly town hall with your host, Marion Crow, your resource for COVID-19 related news and information. Send us your questions to FNHMA@ihtoday.ca. Over the next hour, you'll hear from health professionals and Indigenous community leaders. As always, we have reliable and credible information for you and your community. We want to hear from you.
Tansei, from the traditional terry of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We are joining you from Toronto in the NationTalk studio, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to the FNHMA Town Hall on COVID-19. My name is Marion Crow. I am a Papa Princess from Saskatchewan, Treaty 4 territory, now having the privilege to work, play, and live in unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory. I am so delighted that this is where you are getting your COVID-19 reliable, credible information here at the First Nations Health Managers Association Town Hall. With that, I want to let you know that if you have a question for any of the panelists today, please send those questions to fnhma@ihtoday.ca. I know that you are quickly putting in those questions for our all-star First Nations panel. We have with us Pamela Wolf-Roberge from Indigenous Services Canada. We have leader, thank you, Chief Sinclair, OCN Manitoba representing. And we're gonna round out with my girl crush, Jocelyn Forsma from the National Association of Friendship Centers, who's doing amazing work for all of our cousins to get vaccinated in urban settings. I do want to let you know, I am so excited to share with everybody. I get my second dose. I'm getting it on Saturday. Never been so happy to get a needle in my life. Fully vaccinated as of this weekend. Woohoo! Love yourself, love your people, your cookums, your mushums, and go get your vaccine when you get an opportunity to do so as well. Now, enough from the crow's nest. Let's send it over to no stranger to the show, our good friend Pam. Pam, come on into the crow's nest and give us all those amazing stats.
Thanks, Marion, and thanks for having me back here again today. My name is Pam. I grew up and I live in Ottawa in traditional Algonquin territory. It's beautiful here today, 30 degrees. I'm from Jibasing First Nation, a member there in a beautiful Manitoulin Island. So for today, our update, as Marion noted, I'm going to share with you some statistics and some updates on COVID infection for First Nations living on reserve, as well as what we're seeing in terms of vaccine uptake. And at the end, I'm just going to share with you a brief update on some new information and advice released for vaccines for youth aged 12 and up. So I'll start with the COVID infections for First Nations living on reserve. As of yesterday, what we were seeing is total infections of just over 28,000, so 28,710. That's since the start of the pandemic for First Nations living on reserve. Of those, 27,514 have recovered. So that means right now, as of yesterday, we had 864 active cases. So those are the cases that are still able to pass the disease or the virus along. To date, we've had 332 deaths, sadly. While we have been seeing a downward trend, so you may remember from my past times being on here, we had a peak in mid-January, and we were starting to see a downward trend up until mid-April. But over the past few weeks, we have seen a slight increase. And that increase, what we've been seeing is a lot of those cases have been linked to people 19 years and younger, a group that's largely been untouched by vaccine efforts so far. So there could be a correlation between those that haven't been vaccinated and those cases. But the good news is, as we are seeing more vaccines come into Canada, we're seeing provinces and territories increase eligibility for and access to those vaccines. Many of the new cases continue to be linked to small and large gatherings. I've said this before, but we know that it's in these settings where we tend to let our guard down. So it's important when you are meeting with anyone outside of your household that you make sure you keep a safe distance of 2 meters and that you wear a mask. It's important also on the topic of masks, you may have seen in the media that the United States CDC had recently changed their recommendations related to mask use, but for the time being in Canada, the Public Health Agency of Canada is advising that we should continue to wear our masks until we see the rate of vaccination increase, and then we start to see those cases or those infections start to decrease, and we start to see that pressure that we're seeing in our hospitals and in ICU settings start to go down. For vaccine uptake, as I noted just previously, we're starting to see a great influx of vaccines coming into Canada. And with that, we're also seeing a gradual increase in vaccine uptake. So as of yesterday, we saw more than 21.9 million COVID vaccine doses in Canada. Out of those doses, 452,043 have been administered to 687 First Nations, Inuit, and territorial communities. And we're also starting to see second doses be administered. So of those, just under 150,000 second doses have been administered. So what does this mean in terms of coverage among our populations? So based on Statistics Canada, their population projections that they have from 2020, this represents 62% of adults in First Nations living on reserve and just over 69% of adults living in the territories who have received at least one dose of the COVID vaccine. So we're really pleased to see this rolling out. Now, the information that I said I would share with you is related to new approvals for adolescents age 12 and up for the Pfizer vaccine. So yesterday, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, they issued their advice to the federal, provincial, and territorial governments on the use of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine in adolescents aged 12 to 15 years of age. This advice follows Health Canada's approval of the vaccine, noting that it is safe and effective for this age group. And this was based on phase 3 clinical trials that Pfizer did on that population. So with this addition and this new age cohort, NACI is recommending that a complete series, so that's both doses for the Pfizer vaccine, be offered to youth aged 12 and up. And all of those trial participants that participated in the trial to gather the data to ensure that this vaccine is safe, they'll continue to be monitored over the next 2 years, similar to what the other age cohorts are will be monitored following the phase trials. I lost my word there for a second. What's important though is public health measures remain the foundation of the pandemic response while vaccines continue to roll out across the country. With the number of vaccinations, while it's steadily increasing, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to remain vigilant about following the public health advice that your officials in your province or territory are sharing with you. Even with the arrival of warm weather and that urge to get outside, it's still important that we limit the amount of contact that we have with people outside of our immediate circle. It's important that everyone, regardless of your vaccine status, that we continue to follow those public health measures. So for everybody listening in today, I encourage you to get that information that you need from a trusted source to give you that confidence when it's your turn to get the vaccine. With that, it'll help us get out of this hopefully a bit sooner, and as Marion noted, help to protect ourselves and our communities. And with that, Marion, I'll end it there and I'll pass it over to you.
Pamela, thank you so much. You are such an amazing partner in sharing all of the epi-stats that everyone wants to hear about. And don't forget, with vaccines comes hope. We are getting there. I know everyone is exhausted and tired. Our hospitals are seeing the most capacity we've ever seen in our lifetimes, and we can persevere and be resilient as we always have been. So hang in there and know that you are loved and supported. With that, I want to say, Kelsey Thompson, if you are watching, thank you, girl, so much for these mohawk earrings I'm wearing today. Much love. We're all tribes. I feel like I should be saying hookah. I'm trying to be funny. Let's go back to the serious business here. And with that, Chief Sinclair, OCN, come on into the crow's nest. It has been a bumpy road for your nation. Share with us your COVID journey. Come on in.
Thanks, Marion. First time being in a crow's nest, so I guess you could say I'm an old crow. But anyhow, Tansy, when you got Christian Sinclair, ni Senigason, Pascal Creation Notes, I mean, any time I'm Mapiakutan, it's Achmok COVID-19 Manchus. My name is Christian Sinclair, leader of the Opaskwayak Act Cree Nation. It's an honor to be here in the virtual traditional territory of where you're hosting from, Marion, and to all the presenters here today. We look forward to sharing information with all the viewers out there from across Turtle Island. And a big shout out to all the membership of the Opaskwayak Cree Nation, being vigilant and following and respecting the protocols that we have in place as everybody else is across the country. Recognizing the fact that this is a once in 100-year historic situation, you know, as we start to learn about COVID-19 and when the last pandemic struck in 1918, I believe it was. Here we are just over 100 years later and dealing with the exact same type of situation. But the fortunate part of it is learning from those histories and being able to apply them to what we have today with the new technologies, with the new forms of communication. And with that, with the experience in Opaskwayak Cree Nation, when the COVID-19 first came in just over a year ago in February, late January, early February, we started hearing about it in Opaskwayak, and there was a little bit of talk about it saying, is this something we should be concerned about or aware of? So we did keep an eye on it in the early stages. And then as it started to make its way into Canada, we quickly started to build in the mechanisms and reorganize our governance structure in order to plan for this. Being an ex-military 7 years, what we did is we separated our incident command team and basically loaded that up with staff. So with that incident command team, we were meeting every day initially, starting to build and prepare for the inevitable. And by doing that, we were able to get our team into a mode of operating, knowing what to expect when the reality hit us, which sure enough it did. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. And I think that's fair to say that every community is dealing with this for the most part, or has dealt with it, or will be dealing with it. So with that, we structured our team with the Opaskwayak Health Services. Glenn Ross, who's the director there, and our head nurse, Marie Jeb, both from OCN, did an excellent job of coordinating and mobilizing their team to work very closely with the leadership table. And with that team, we separated the politics from the administrative piece for them to do what they needed to do. We were there only in the support roles to lobby the government where needed, as needed, and restructure our government where we had to in order to prepare for this. As somebody once said, this is an invisible enemy, and it's very similar to a wartime situation where you got to prepare the logistics accordingly, the communications, the administration, while at the same time still delivering service to our people on a daily basis. A key part of that, and a blessing in disguise, was that we were able to invest in infrastructure related to fiber optic about a year before that. So it was a nice blessing that allowed us to still communicate with our community, with all of our government buildings. And then recognizing the impact that it had on the children with their schooling, we set up some Wi-Fi towers immediately, knowing that we didn't want our educational component impacted. We also purchased 500 computers for the children to be able to learn remotely, so that there wasn't any major upset in the stopping of their learning. So the teachers themselves under the Opaskwayak Education Services mobilized themselves and started their planning accordingly. So we do have different levels of planning. And right now we are in the midst of a code red within Opaskwayak because of the variant. We have a strong line of communication where we, as we say, never let a good crisis go to waste. It allowed us to be able to utilize our technology more effectively, restructure our administration with the fiber optic, put throughout the community. We were able to get the majority of all our people, probably 99.9%, all on EFTs. So it's allowed us to modernize our administration in that sense. But really the most important thing here is the messaging has been pounded out daily is, if you love yourself, your family, your community, you're going to respect and implement the protocols. Wash your hands, keep your distance, wear your masks, and avoid visiting where you can, and minimize your exposure to the public at large. And for the most part, the membership of Opaskwayak has done that. Late in the year, we unfortunately hit a serious note where it really hit the community. And that's where we really tested our systems. And I'm proud to say that those systems that we built in those months leading up to the late November, early December, when it struck our community, and we had a crisis or an outbreak within an outbreak, our care home had a full impact of approximately 20 elders, and including the staff. So we made sure that we called the military immediately. And I really want to thank Minister Mark Miller, because in that situation, knowing what we saw and experienced in Quebec and in southern Manitoba, where unfortunately a lot of elders were lost in the care homes, we had to learn from those lessons and mobilize quickly. So when Canada says they offer those services to assist our country, foreign and domestic, and in this case, an invisible enemy, if you will, they mobilized within 24 hours from the call I put out to Minister Mark Miller. They had to go through their protocols and mobilize a branch of the military from the CFB Shiloh. So they sent in the reconnaissance team, came in, and what the key there to that solution to avoid a repeat of what happened in the other jurisdictions was making sure the elders had 24-hour care. We had to replace the staff that were sick and make sure that they were nursed and well hydrated. By doing that, we were able to really save the elders in that case. On the community at large, we had, and to date, about 287 cases. Unfortunately, we lost 5 members of the community. But as we learned, it was really minimizing, because in the case of El Paso, it is a central hub, an economic hub for the Swampy Creek Tribal Council. So we get approximately 20,000 First Nations surrounding the community. The town of the Paws right next door, and we have a main thoroughfare of airport, railway, and highway traffic. So we had to find a balance to first and foremost take care of the health and safety and well-being of our community, and secondly, try to maintain the economic balance by minimizing or reducing the hours, implementing the protocols where needed, or just completely shutting down. We didn't want to take any chance or risk anywhere at any time, knowing what we've seen by provincial governments across Canada, where they waited too late or to the last minute. We were very proactive in shutting down early, weeks in advance, knowing that these impacts were going to come. So, with everything that has been thrown at us, we built a strong security system within the community. All the checkpoints were shut down. The nursing staff, the medical staff of Pastrac was beefed up. We had the military on some, and still do where needed, as needed. I believe we were one of the first in Canada to call in the Canadian military, and they responded very quickly and effectively, and very thankful for that. Aside from that, it's business as usual in OCN. We still move, we keep learning, and it's always key to being proactive rather than being reactive. So we've been able to do that, and of course, the information that we get, people say it's information overload, but I'd rather have information and be aware of it at the community level than find out ourselves the hard way after the fact. So with the good work that Pamela and her team are doing, Jocelyn with the Friendship Centers, the communication through AP10 and any other communication channel for that matter, every piece that we could absorb into our strategy has helped us minimize the impact of this virus. On the communication side, we started a Moochigan morning show. Moochigan, of course, Marion, as you know, is good time. So we want to also send positive messaging rather than just negative messages or reports of the negative stats. We wanted to make it fun and exciting, send out birthday wishes, etc. We initiated a afternoon radio show daily, and it's still going on to this day. We have our online communication strategy. We put out the statistics of people that are affected, sick, people that have passed, etc. But always continuous updates of the latest developments within the evolution of this virus. So knowing that we're in the midst of wave 3, June 1st to the 4th of this year, we'll be getting our second shot for the community, and a vast majority of the community has received the virus. Of course, there are still people that have doubts, but again, as I said earlier, if you love yourself, your family, your community, you will get those shots, because it's only strengthens your own immune system, and of course the community at large as we move forward, and of course any people that you come in contact with now and in the future. And it is our new reality, and we've adjusted accordingly, and I'm proud to say that we've successfully been able to hit this head on. Of course, we took some negative hits and part of those negative stats, but that's part of the reality of the situation, but at least to minimize it, and that's the key. And of course, sharing information where we can with what we've experienced with others across Canada. I've gotten calls from BC right to northern Quebec and everywhere in between. So sharing, learning, and helping each other really in this process.
Chief Sinclair, you talked about so much there, and we're going to unpack a little bit more when we go to the question box. So, Chief Sinclair, I do want to say you certainly are a popular guest. Your council chambers is watching you right now here on ihtoday.ca. We are broadcasting with our Indigenous radio partners as well. And don't forget, if you have a question, send those to FNHMA at ihtoday.ca. And if somebody wants to watch in a viewing party of your own household, remember, stay a moose length away. You can do so by checking your local listings and watching us on APTN Saturdays, 5 o'clock Eastern Daylight for those in the East, but check those local listings so that you can watch as well on Saturday. Now, keeping up with ensuring messaging, ensuring that our cousins, our aunties, all of our kin in urban settings are getting information that's reliable, credible, and safe. Let's stop the misspread, or the spread of misinformation, I should say. You can tell this isn't my full-time job. I can't wait to go being back to a CEO of the First Nation Health Managers Association. But with that, Jocelyn, I just commend you, and I hope you feel the gratitude of all of the urban populations right now, because of your work, are getting vaccines in a priority environment. Jocelyn Forsema, come on into the crow's nest, girl. You're up next. And Jocelyn, I'm just going to remind you to unmute. I'll wear that t-shirt next time.
Oh, I'm usually so much better at that. And yeah, so thank you so much, Marion. It's quite cozy up here in the crow's nest, as you say. Even though I'm Wolf Clan, I promise to behave myself a little bit. Wache miswe, shwebanish, nishnakasun, was created in I'm originally from Northern Ontario and have called the unceded Algonquin territory my home, or at least the place where I keep my things for the last little while. So I thought today I would just share a little bit. I'd start with maybe some of the shortfalls, some of the things that we're still trying to push for in the urban settings. Then talk about some of the accomplishments, some of the great things that have been happening, and then maybe some of the next steps that we're looking to. So first of all, I would have to say that it's important that we ring the alarm bell about what's happening in Toronto. There's been thousands of cases of Indigenous people getting COVID-19, and right now, to serve a population of about 70,000 people, that's about how many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit are in Toronto. There are 2 part-time clinics, and they are doing incredible work out of Anishinaabe Health and the Aduje Clinic, but they're getting so tired, and there's a wonderful network of urban Indigenous organizations that are just working around the clock to help people, keep people safe, and ensure they have access to the vaccine. There's been hundreds of cases of people getting hospitalized, as well as passing away. And I feel like for as much as it's been happening in Toronto, that it's important for us to remember our kin, our family members, our friends, people who are there, because I think even though it's a large urban setting and we assume that these people should have all the access to every best hospital and medical procedure and everything that's there, a lot of times, as we know, our people, it might be available, but it's not always accessible within those large urban spaces. So for those who are out there, who are decision makers and who have the ability, check in with your Toronto colleagues, the organizations there, and say, what else can we do? Because it'll be so important for those 70,000, well, probably about 50,000 with adults and young people, to ensure that they get equitable access to the vaccine in a timely manner. We found through the advocacy of First Nations, Métis, Inuit leadership and the advocacy of urban Indigenous organizations, including the amazing Friendship Center leadership, that we have been successful in getting widespread support for all Indigenous people to be vaccinated as a priority population, almost with every province and territory. Even some of the sticky ones have come around. We're not going to name names, but I just think that's important because early on, it seemed like such an uphill battle to get those decision makers to agree to have Indigenous populations that are urban, off-reserve, outside of Inuit Nunangat to be prioritized and to have access to the vaccine, and to also help set up the urban Indigenous vaccines. It seems the case now that most regions, I can't say all yet, do allow for 18 plus all Indigenous people to receive the vaccine in a priority manner. And most regions have at least one urban Indigenous vaccine site or clinic. It's a little bit tougher in some of the rural areas. We know that there's been some challenges in some areas in rural Alberta that are off reserve that don't also have a friendship center there. So there's definitely gaps, but we're heartened that the provinces by and large seem to be responding to the advocacy. One of the things that we're still working with provinces and territories around is the second rounds of the vaccines. Like most of the mainstream populations, Indigenous peoples have been extended to about the 4-month range for the second vaccine. However, for those clinics that have been happening on reserve, the timeline is about 2 or 3 weeks. As we know, our people often don't stay in one place. They're moving back and forth. They're still attending medical appointments in large urban centers. And so we just feel like it's really important that all Indigenous people stay within the same time frame that's been available on reserve, which has been about that 2 to 3 week mark, sometime around a month. So that's still been a challenge to make sure. Ontario's come around and that's been great. We'd like to see that across the board. It's the idea that, you know, if it's available for people somewhere, it should be available in an equitable fashion for all of our people everywhere. We are also concerned about some of the urban Inuit populations that are outside of Inuit Nunangat that may not be under the umbrella of, say, a First Nations delivery mechanism. That's the case in Western Canada, especially in places like Manitoba, Alberta, that we have, you know, significant Inuit populations, but they're not being considered as part of the Indigenous population. Our own president is Inuk and lives in Saskatchewan and isn't considered Indigenous. They're really focusing on the First Nations and Métis populations. So it's things like that that we just have to remember, you know, all of our kin in as much as we can, and who we're leaving behind, so we can make sure they're under our circles. For our accomplishments, as you know, before day one, Friendship Centers were providing a wide range of supports. They pivoted quickly to be able to provide COVID-19 supports, the food, supply delivery, transportation, transitioning to online. We were able to purchase over 400 laptops and tablets to donate to elders, to young people who were trying to finish school, to families so that they can keep in touch with family members, and also some of the workers at the Friendship Center for programming, for counseling. We've had some Friendship Centers do specific community mental health initiatives. So not just a phone number to call, but people who are ingrained in the community to provide greater outreach. We have approximately, actually over 40 Friendship Centers across the country and more coming that are part of an immunization clinic in some form. Most of them are providing the clinics directly, and many more than that 40 are providing some type of cultural support to mainstream clinics. So, I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. We're really proud of the efforts that all of our Friendship Centers have been making, and in full partnership with other urban Indigenous organizations, local public health units. And there have been some really great partnerships with First Nations governments, Métis governments, and local Inuit organizations as well. So it really has been all parties coming together for the best interest of our community members. Um, so we also, as the NAFC, early on, were a part of, we developed a Take Care in COVID campaign where we developed a number of ads using Anishinaabe comedian Ryan McMahon. And we actually found out that we won 3 awards for that communications campaign. And so we're taking it to the next level, and we're doing the next iteration, which is the Take Action in COVID. We're going to be doing a podcast. I hope that Miss Marion Crow will join us on one of those podcasts. And we're also looking at targeting young people in communications campaigns. So we're going to get really trendy and cool and do some TikToks. And then we also want to ensure we're putting some tangible information in people's hands as well. So not forgetting our unsheltered friends and family who may be living in shelters or on the street, just making sure that they have access to proper information so they can make the best decisions for themselves as well. So yeah, we are not slowing down. We're continuing to work. We also have been beneficiaries of the Indigenous Community Support Fund. We want to thank Indigenous Services for that flexible funding, which has helped us respond quickly and in the best way to the community needs. I definitely think, give credit where credit is due. I'm more than happy to be critical of governments and others as I have, but definitely credit is due, and we appreciate that partnership. I guess just in closing, I think it's important that we continue to combat the misinformation, as you said, Marion. It's been concerning to hear what people have been saying and trying to at least make sure that if they're going to make the decision not to get the vaccine, that it's based on good information, solid information, and we're doing our part to make sure we're encouraging folks to know more, to know the facts, and we don't know. We kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we don't really know when it's all going to end. It's certainly not going to go back to normal because that was a normal that wasn't really working for us in the first place. So as we're still in the midst of it, trying to keep our eye to the future as to what new reality do we want to create, and I think what's come out of this is just those strong partnerships, the way that we've worked together, and the Indigenous leadership throughout this pandemic has just been so incredible. It's been leadership that we could believe in, leadership that we can trust, that's been proactive and very collaborative. I'm just so proud of to be who I am and to work with the leadership that we have. It's been quite incredible, and I hope that we can continue that good work in all areas that we need support post-pandemic. So miigwech for having me on again.
Jocelyn, so much said there, and Chief Sinclair commented on the partnerships that are coming out of all of this. I mean, let's hope that we continue to lift each other up, be supportive in our new normal. And I think that's one thing, that's very common across Turtle Island, is making sure that we're all safe, all protected, and all loved. So thank you for the amazing leadership and partners. And also thank you to those who are viewing, who are watching, listening on the radio stations right now. Thanks again to Jennifer for getting your information from FNHMA and from our co-content creators who join the show every week. And Cecil and Sunny, I thank you as well for getting your trusted, reliable information here. Jarrett, Pierre, Bruce Crow, all appreciated. And you know where else you can find more information, so if you should choose to, you can email or call InfoPoint. And with that, I'm going to kick it back to the studio for a short message on a public service announcement on InfoPoint.
Created by your First Nations Health Managers Association, we introduce InfoPoint, a convenient and accessible helpful desk for First Nations health managers looking for credible sources of information on COVID-19. Don't have time to dig? Talk to a real person now at 1-855-446-2719 or email infopoint@fnhma.ca. Indigenous Health Today is another resource of information by region at ihtoday.ca.
And for anyone who doesn't have time to look for that barrage of information, I mean, if you even have access, Chief Sinclair brought up our infrastructure concerns. Feel free to pick up the phone and give us a call. Kathy Mitchell is there waiting to share information and resources with you. I would also like to acknowledge the FNHMA Board of Governors, who are all community leaders working tirelessly to keep their nations safe and protected during this global pandemic. And of course, the FNHMA family, who are always there to answer questions, pick up those phones, and get information out in the best way that we can. And I do want to say that we have a hot inbox today, and it's not too late. That is FNHMA at ihtoday.ca. So let's mosey on over to the inbox and share with you some of the questions that are coming in from the viewers. Jocelyn, you got a lot of shout outs there too, girl. I just wanted to share that with you. Your NAFC network is coming through. So thank you very much. So the first question, Chief Sinclair, come on back in, you old crow now. You talked a little bit about the outbreak affecting your elders' home last fall. What got your nation through that? You talked about lives lost. Come share a little bit more, Chief Sinclair.
Yeah, further to that point there, when we saw the outbreak within Opaskwayak in the Rod McGillivray Memorial Care Home, while dealing with numbers that were rising rapidly in OCN, this is where we had to, appreciate and respect the good work our staff was doing at the administration level, both for OCN itself and, of course, the heroes at the Opaskwayak Health Services. And I say that, with a lot of heart and soul, because any health worker that's out there, we realize the importance of the frontline workers that are always usually forgotten or take a backseat in normal times. But this really showed the importance of the work that they do. So in the case of our outbreak, within the outbreak, we saw what happened, as I said earlier, with Quebec and southern Manitoba, and we had to learn very quickly from that, literally on the fly, and see how we could minimize that. So there was no doubt in calling the Canadian military. It was surprising. Some of our members said, "Why do we need the military? It shows a sign of weakness." But if we didn't do that, I can't imagine what would have happened if we didn't have that support to help support our healthcare workers, especially the ones that had to stay at home that got infected as well. So they were really a blessing and heroes in a peaceful environment to be helping us deal and cope with the situation that we had, let alone dealing with the general population with the large numbers that we had that had fallen ill with the virus.
Oh, thank you, Chief Sinclair. Don't go away. Stay unmuted with me for a moment. Chief Sinclair, you talked about reaching out to your networks for support and, making that call to Minister Miller and him rising to the occasion. Are other chiefs calling you as well that have elder care homes? And what are you saying to your other chief colleagues across Turtle Island?
Yeah, there was calls made and they asked how we did it, and it was just simply a matter of picking up the phone, calling the regional director, getting the minister's number. Former regional director Stephen Trainer from Manitoba, who has now since moved on to Ottawa, provided that number, and with the protocols within the federal government, Minister Mark Miller had to call the Minister of Defense, Sajjan, I believe the minister is there, and they had to go through their protocols, call the province of Manitoba and let them know they were coming. But in times like that, we can't play politics. We just have to move and react accordingly. And they did react. And being in the position that I'm in, responsible for a total population of 6,400 members, 3,800 on reserve, it was take care of the elders first and foremost. They're the knowledge keepers of our community. They're the most vulnerable, and we made sure we had to tackle that head on first and foremost, which we did with that support, of course. So when the other chiefs are calling across Canada at that time, my advice to them was don't wait, don't take any chances, clamp down right now, implement the protocols you need to do, and make sure your people are informed well, and to take this very seriously, because once it gets in there, it spreads very rapidly. And the reason for that, and as I say again, to not let a good crisis go to waste, whether you're on reserve or even off reserve with the vulnerable off reserve members, which we have a lot of as well, it was to ensure that they have those supports. So this really puts a magnifying glass on the lack of housing in the First Nations, the lack of medical care, the lack of health resources, and the list goes on and on. So when you can imagine 2 or 3 generations of families living under one roof and how quick that can spread, this is a wake-up call for the government of Canada. It doesn't matter which party is in power. We need to do the right thing, and that's really just a simple matter of humanity.
Well said, Chief Sinclair. Well said. And you know what? I just wanted to make a note for any nation who is still working on pandemic planning. It's not too late to engage. I mean, this isn't over. And if you're looking for a COVID specific or a pandemic planning tool, we have one for you at the First Nations Health Managers Association. It was very rapidly the first document that we were able to bring to everyone who is in our network, and you can find that on FNHMA.ca. And again, that's a pandemic planning tool that you can modify to your own nation. Now, Jocelyn, come back on in, my girl, crush you. I do want a question answered from you with respect. One of our viewers is saying, Jocelyn, first, thank you so much for the work you are doing on behalf of everyone who are in towns and cities across Canada. We know there are elders who do not have access to the internet and sometimes TVs. So we know they don't necessarily know where to go or how we can help them and others be safe. Jocelyn, what are some of your comments? Do they check in with their local friendship center? What advice do you have in terms of getting that information to our most vulnerable populations?
Thanks, Marion. I remember to unmute myself. That's going to be like the caption of 2020 is you're on mute. Yeah, so we've seen a lot of different ways in which we've been able to engage elders. I mean, obviously anybody that's out there, and if you know of someone, not just an elder, but somebody who's vulnerable, you know, somebody maybe with a disability, or maybe somebody, even a parent who has as a child, you know, and is trying to work while also providing childcare while you know, school's not in. Just check in on them, you know, for those who are able to, offering, you know, even like Uber Eats, sort of, you know, a gift certificate, or are offering to bring food and cook food, which might be a little bit more accessible for some folks. But definitely we've seen friendship centers do things like offer a phone tree. So it starts with one person, and then that person is given the number to another person. And so, you know, you just have like this cycle of people checking in. They've done elders bingos, so they're all checked in. The elders have been pretty savvy actually in learning some of the new apps, and especially if they have somebody at home who can kind of set it up for them. We had an elder that, you know, we would often use for events and conferences and things like that. And we invited her to a gathering that we had, and she said, you know, nobody's even called me for almost a year. It's like all of a sudden the events weren't happening, people weren't calling her anymore to come and open close meetings. And I think part of that we've done away with it a little bit. So we started inviting her to the events that we've been having, just so that she can connect and listen in. And we've been getting our Senate together as well, just checking in with them and them checking in with each other. We've also had friendship centers, obviously, like doing the food delivery, supply delivery. Some of them have been picking traditional medicines. Some of them have been doing transportation, bringing them to their appointments or bringing them to pharmacies so they can get their prescriptions filled. So there's been so many ways in which friendship centers have responded. Also, as we mentioned, getting some of those laptops and tablets to the elders so that then they could connect to their loved ones. Some of them with data. We've also been able to provide some data and internet top-ups for some friendship centers so that people could be quite accessible. We've even had some friendship centers that have set up computer stations outside of the friendship center so that people didn't have to physically go into the center, so they could apply for the CERB benefits. They've had people doing phone intakes so that they could help them to know what they are eligible for with the CERB benefits or any of the other benefits that are available within their province. So there's just so many ways in which we've responded, but the isolation, the mental health has been quite incredible. Mental health, I know, has been a big theme across the board, and it's no different for urban communities, especially those, and even including myself, who haven't been able to go back to our territories in over a year now, partly because of lockdown, partly because of travel restrictions, but it has been quite difficult, and it's been great to find ways to connect, to feel like just even for a little bit that maybe we aren't in a pandemic, and then before you have to go back to reality.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Pam, it's your turn to come on back into the crow's nest now, too. Can you remind us, Pam, of the role that Indigenous Services Canada plays in all of this? I mean, a lot of people are turning to Indigenous Services Canada to ask about vaccines, etc. So tell us how you work with the provinces and what that looks like and whose responsibility, and share a little bit with us, Pam.
For sure. I think we've been here and our role has been largely to support communities across the country. I think, as we're seeing from Chief and both from Jocelyn and from others, that really, I think our role was to make sure that we were supporting communities, lifting them up, giving them the tools and the funding necessary for them to roll out their pandemic plans. That's included everything from vaccine supplies to PPE to guidance, things to really support them based on what they deemed that was needed. But specific to vaccines, under normal times, and I would say even under COVID, the approach has been in Canada to really leverage our current existing infrastructure because we know that it works. So we know that it works for flu vaccine and for other vaccines that we have coming in. So how it's worked since the start is really our colleagues at the Public Health Agency and those experts on the National Advisory Committee for Immunization, they really worked with Health Canada and those three looking to review the data that was coming in for vaccines, ensuring they were safe, that they were effective, giving their approval and making their recommendations on those populations of who those vaccines would be given to, and also prioritizing populations as we've heard about today. Once those vaccines were approved, our colleagues at PSBC, I'm not going to talk about the acronym, but the Government of Canada worked on bringing those vaccines to Canada. So like we've seen with Pfizer, Moderna, and those other vaccines. Once they landed in Canada, those were shipped to the provinces and territories. And what provinces and territories did since as they were coming in is they were also working on their prioritization strategies. So taking all of that information that our colleagues at Health Canada, at NACI, at FAC, what we were learning about the virus and how it was infecting or affecting populations, they further then would prioritize and had a strategy in terms of how to reach those that were most at risk first, and then open it up to others as vaccine supply came in. And once they were delivered to communities, it's really stepped in to ensure that communities, if needed, we were making sure that they had the PPE so that healthcare workers in communities were safe when they were giving those vaccines, making sure that communities had access to masks if they weren't able to get them on their own, making sure that they had the vaccine supplies. So those needles, swabs, Band-Aids, anything that maybe the province, or if they were short a bit in terms of shipment to them, making sure that they had those. And really communities, we've seen just incredible efforts across the country and communities innovating how they're doing this, making sure that they're reaching their populations and rolling out and administering those vaccines. So I would say From a NIST standpoint, we're really here just to support those efforts, and communities have really led the charge in designing what that vaccine clinic would look like in their community.
Thank you so much, Pam. I really appreciate you putting a little bit of context around what that role has been. And again, thank you to you and all of your colleagues. I really feel like we are in this together, standing shoulder to shoulder from a distance, of course, but really all hands on deck have been needed. And it's been a significant progress to see where we have been to where we are now. Con, Michael, Penelope Moon Walker, I want to say hello. Thank you for watching the FNHMA Town Hall here on ihtoday.ca, on Facebook pages, and on Saturdays on APTN. A reminder, if you have a question, if you want to give a shout out, I'll make sure to do that. Share some love with all of those beautiful health leaders who are keeping us safe. We're happy to send love to your health director, your nurse in charge, whoever you want to. Let's continue to lift each other up during such a hard and difficult time. Now, I do want to go back into the inbox for one more question before. I can't believe how fast this hour goes by. But Chief Sinclair, come back in again. And I just want to ask you, Chief Sinclair, what are some of the lessons your nation's going to take away from the COVID experience of 2020, 2021?
What's interesting about that, and first of all, a shout out to all of the management, my fellow colleagues, my Nashchigawak, our council members, and of course our Katayak, our elders within the community, because by coming together and working and supporting each other, that's a key part of what we call in the Cree world Wagotwin, the law of relationships. So that's really brought us closer together, and having to change our mindset and unlearn what the Indian Act has done to us and start going back to the roots of who we are as the original people, the first peoples of this land, what worked for us for thousands of years. And that's what it's done. Because we also have to remember the traditional medicine people that were a key part of bringing their medicines in for those that chose to use that medicine as well proactively and are still doing it to this day. So there's been a reawakening in that sense, working closer together with each other and knowing that it's delivering service and the best quality of life for our people with whatever resources we have available to us. So knowing ISC had provided the resources without any strict limitations, which normally is done in the past, allowed us to do what we needed to do for the best delivery for our people on the ground, both for on reserve and off reserve members. So it's allowed us to strengthen, reconnect with people off reserve. And it's also allowed us to, and I found this interesting, family members that you don't talk to for years, and a shout out to family members in the Mosagigan Cree Nation, in Pemichigamak, Cross Lake Cree Nation, and of course, friends and relatives. I just wanted to reach out across the United States and Canada for that matter. So I say Tansy and hello to each and every one of you, and Kinanaskot, and thank you for reaching out and knowing that people are thinking of each other across the land. So there's been a reawakening of those ties and those family bonds and the Wagotwin way. But as we move forward to continue supporting, working each other, respecting these new protocols, people talk about COVID fatigue, but the reality is we're not out of the trees or the forest yet, whatever that old saying is. We're still having to move forward, as Pamela said earlier, Jocelyn. We got to still be diligent and keep working, protecting each other by respecting those protocols. So it is a blessing in disguise in some ways. Unfortunately, we've lost some members in other parts of communities, and I say sorry and pray for your families, but we'll get through this. That was it.
Chief Sinclair, again, well said. We will persevere and be the resilient people that we have always been. And with that, I would just like to say again, a huge thank you to everyone who is listening, watching, and to our distinguished panelists today. Thank you so much for sharing the information from your nation, from your organization, from our federal family. It is heartfelt. The thanks from everybody who is watching. And with that, I do have some thank yous to get through. It takes a team to bring all of this together, and it is so amazing to work with Indigenous media partners all across Turtle Island. And a special thank you to Mi'kmaq Maliseet Native News in Nova Scotia, The Wolf 95.7 in Montreal, in Fredericton, Nation News in Montreal, FNHMA. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Of course, Element FM, Anishinabeg, Nation, Wawate News in the Sioux, Element FM in Toronto and in Ottawa, APTN News, MBC Radio in Larange. We also say thank you to Eagle Feather News in Saskatoon, Alberta Native News in Edmonton, CJWE in Edmonton, CKLB Yellowknife, Co-op Radio, the First Nations Drum in Vancouver, CFNR in Terrence, BC, and of course, one of our newest partners, Hashlitsa Newspaper in Port Albany, BC. You can also find the radio rebroadcast on The Wolf, Sundays at 9, CKLB in Yellowknife, Thursdays at 7, and CIFM. I can't wait to talk to you guys tomorrow morning. You're always so uplifting and sunny. And Davey, I am your auntie forever. Of course, Co-op Radio is rebroadcasting Sundays at 7. CFNR FM in Terrence is on Sundays as well. CGAM in Windsor on Thursdays at 8 p.m. And of course, MBC Radio Thursdays at 4 p.m. Central. And just a quick heads up, if you want to hear about the status of how our hospitals in Canada are faring during this third wave, make sure to tune in next week. We will be welcoming Cameron Love, the CEO and president of the Ottawa Hospital, and I think he'll give us a quick glimpse into how the new civic campus is being unpacked as well. And until next time, I want to remind everybody, wear your mask, wash your hands, and stay a moose length away from everybody. So stay safe, stay kind, courageous, have empathy, and until next week, hi.